Hey everyone, welcome back to In Her Wallet, a weekly show helping women around the world take control of their finances for good and build better financial futures one episode at a time. My name is Sophia. I'm the host of In Her Wallet podcast, creator behind In Her Wallet, and an accredited investment representative here in Canada. Today, we are talking about your financial game plan, aka what do you need to do to achieve financial security and success, and how do you get there? In today's episode, I'm joined by an amazing professional. Her name is Scheherazade Hasan. She is a senior wealth advisor and associate portfolio manager at one of Canada's most prominent wealth management and personal finance companies, Wealthsimple. Chances are you've heard of them, you know of them, and I'm so delighted and proud to be able to bring Scheherazade and Wealthsimple onto the In Her Wallet podcast. Scheherazade has worked at Wealthsimple for the past 6 years, and she works with her clients on helping them make informed decisions to achieve their financial goals. She's really diving deep into all things personal finance roadmap. So, where do you start and how do you get to where you want to be with practical tips along the way? There are quite a few things I personally took away from this episode as well, even though I have background in personal finance. So, I can't wait for you to tune in. Before we dive into all things financial game plan, there is one thing I want to ask you. If you do feel like In Her Wallet brings you any value, I would so appreciate if you took 30 seconds of your time to leave us a star rating and a review. All you need to do if you're listening on Spotify is to just click the star rating and leave us 5 stars if you feel like we've deserved it. And also you can leave us a written short or long review on Apple Podcasts. Scroll all the way down, you'll see write a review button. Click on it. You can let me know what guests you want to see, what resonates with you, what topics you want to hear about. All of this really helps me show up as a better host for you and helps our podcast grow. Well, with that out of the way, let's dive into the conversation. Scheherazade, I'm so excited to have you onto the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me here, Sophia.
Well, we're going to talk about creating a financial game plan. But before we dive in, let's help our community get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions I ask every guest. And the first one is, what's your go-to coffee order?
Ooh, usually I'll get like a regular coffee with a bit of cream and Splenda.
Okay. What about the movie you can rewatch again and again? Do you have one?
Oh, I found this question so hard because I usually don't love rewatching movies unless it's like a really good comedy. Those I can watch a couple times, but I didn't have one particular one that came to mind.
Have you watched The Proposal with Sandra Bullock and Ryan
I
Reynolds?
have. That's a very good one.
It's
I
so
love
good. I
that
think I'm
movie.
gonna rewatch it this week. I love it.
Honestly, I might too. You've motivated me to do it.
And if you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would that be?
Oh my God, it just got so cold in Toronto. So, anywhere warm, maybe on like a beach. I'd love that right now. Around this time last year, I went to Mexico for the first time. So I choose there. I would go back.
Nice, nice. I actually haven't been to Mexico in quite some time, and I think it has definitely changed because I see people going there all the
Oh,
time and like exploring these authentic places. I would definitely want to go as well.
oh my God. Yes. I think I've seen quite a few people go to like Mexico City recently. I've never been. So I went to like a resort last time. So I'd love to go explore too.
Yes, me too. Okay, well, with that done, let's do an intro. Can you let us know who you are and what you do and where you work? Basically, for those folks who have not heard of you or maybe have not seen you on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently working as an advisor at Wealthsimple, and my day to day kind of involves talking to clients from all different walks of life on just how to set themselves up for success financially to like reach their major life or financial goals. I've been at Wealthsimple for almost 6 years now, and our mission was always to help everyone achieve financial freedom, and that's what initially attracted me to the company, because for me it's really important to support those who are typically underserved. They're and missing kind of the financial education that's necessary to build their wealth in the first place, to get to the point where they're attractive enough to the banks to help out. But anyway, over the years, I've led kind of countless workshops to educate different community groups on personal finance. And so ultimately, I want to contribute to closing the gender and the racial gap in financial well-being. And I know that educating women on personal finance is really important to you as well. So I'm just really excited to be here.
I mean, when Shirzad and I first connected for a call, I felt like we're on the same page. We have such similar paths. Both immigrated to Canada, both went to university here, both followed wealth management path, and now have our own podcasts. So I'm like connected so well with you on the personal level, and I'm so
Yeah,
excited to talk about personal finance for women today.
absolutely. Yeah, completely agree.
Yes. So, Shirzad, obviously, we're talking about the financial game plan today
hmm
and how to achieve that financial security and not only achieve it, but maintain as well. And talking about it from a perspective of, let's say, a woman who is in her mid 20s, trying to understand how does she start. Can you tell us a bit more about the foundational pieces of achieving that financial security?
Yeah, I'd say there are two key pieces to consider. You have your financial foundation built of your emergency fund, your savings, your investments, and more. And then you have your financial plan or roadmap that considers, where you are today, where you need to be to achieve your goals, and then guides you on how to get from point A to point B.
I feel like both of this go hand in hand. So I want to talk in more detail about each of this. And I think starting with the financial foundation, obviously, because unless you have that, I think it'll be very hard to get to the financial plan, which is where
hmm
you put all the pieces together. So, Shirzad, for someone who doesn't have a lot of clarity about their personal finances, I find that a lot of women I meet, they do have the desire
hmm
to be good with money, but they just struggle with where do they start. So, can we address this question?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one that I get from my clients all the time. So I'm glad you asked. The first thing that I always recommend is to first kind of sit down and look at your current financial habits and behaviors. Like, look at your statements, your bank statements from the last couple of months, just to see where your money is going, how much you're spending in different areas of your life. Is that where you'd like to be spending, or are there adjustments you would want to make instead to spend more on what you actually value? But once you've got this really good idea of where you stand, after that, there are a few kind of key steps I recommend taking. Or, if you're someone who's already covered in that area, all of that, but you're just wondering what to do with your money next. The first thing I recommend doing is starting off by paying your high interest debt. So any high interest debt that you're carrying, like credit card debt, is usually very high, high interest. That interest can really add up over time. So it's important to pay it off quickly. But then you'll want to establish an emergency fund so that if anything comes up, you don't need to take on more debt to cover that emergency. But instead, you've got a pool of savings that you can really easily dip into. Um, a really helpful rule of thumb is to set aside enough to cover like 3 to 6 months of your expenses. um, Once you've done those, see if your employer offers a matching program for your retirement savings. Make sure that you're kind of maximizing that and not leaving any money on the table. But, once you're covered in those areas, then start thinking about your financial goals. Is there a purchase you want to make? Are you saving for your own retirement or financial freedom? Establishing goals makes it so much easier to know exactly how to get your money to work for you. So then you can, start to use registered accounts. Like here in Canada, we've got the tax-free savings account, retirement savings plan, now the first home savings account. So starting to use those to save or invest towards the goals that you have kind of established.
I love this answer. It's so value packed. And obviously, as someone who has a background in finance, I could kind of see the different things you were addressing and discussing and the products that go well with it. But
Mhm.
to unpack that answer for people who
Mhm.
are new to finance, let's go step by step. So, first one, you mentioned that first you should pay off any high interest debt and then start saving for an emergency. Do you think a person should still have about $1,000 maybe of some safety net while they're paying off their debt, or no? Or should all the effort just go into paying off the high interest debt?
It's actually such a good question because different advisors have different takes on this. Like, starting off by paying your high interest debt is great because technically, if you have money sitting in a savings account, it's not going to earn more than what your debt is costing you, usually. But at the same time, if you're using every extra dollar that you have to pay off your debt and then you have no savings, just like kind of the example that you mentioned, another emergency is just going to add to your high interest debt. So it can be great to start with a bit of a buffer in your emergency fund, or sometimes what I'll recommend is actually tackling both at once. So let's say after your expenses, you have like $400 left over each month. Maybe split that evenly between paying off your debt and slowly building your emergency savings. So you've got kind of $200 going to each, or you might even do $300 towards your debt, $100 towards your savings, but you're kind of tackling both at the same time.
I really like that approach, and I think it's a great cushion because I have definitely seen people tackle just debt, and then all of a sudden, let's say a dental emergency comes their way and they just add on to their credit card.
Exactly.
So I like what you mentioned. I really relate to that. Shikirizad, I think heading into the winter season, there are a lot of holiday expenses. There are a lot of different festivities that we want to participate in. And I mean, the way to really enjoy it to the fullest, I think, it requires money. That is when I think sinking funds come into play. What's your take on sinking funds?
I honestly think it's a great idea. So, like, sinking funds would be where each account is almost earmarked for a particular goal or a particular expense, like vacations, like you mentioned. And so, for me, it goes back to visualizing where your money is going and bucketing it off accordingly. So I find that an approach like this, it helps for a few different reasons. Like an approach like this could make budgeting easier, for example. You could, when you receive your paycheck, you could automatically have a certain amount go to a sinking fund for vacations, for example, for presents, for eating out this month, for shopping for yourself, kind of like different buckets. And then you would spend from those accounts, ensuring that you never overspend kind of more than you budgeted for. But then again, also having accounts for specific goals means that you can align your investments that are in that specific account to the goal that you're saving for. And so, for example, if you have an account for your long term retirement savings, you know that you can afford to put that money into riskier investments than the money you might have in your vacation sinking fund, which is for your vacation next year. You wouldn't want to take as much risk with that. So I think having those things bucketed off, it just helps you kind of visualize your money going to different goals, keep it separate, and help you stay organized when it comes to budgeting as well.
Totally, I agree with you. And for anyone who doesn't know what a sinking fund is, it's basically a savings account within your bank where you just transfer money from your checking into there and you save it for as we mentioned, known future expenses that will come your way. And
Mhm.
the reason why I really wanted to highlight sinking funds is because of the importance of the emergency fund. Actually, I think a lot of people mistake emergency fund as a savings account, and they oftentimes just take money from it, and then the balance goes down and they have to rebuild it up again. So can we highlight, maybe from your professional experience, how you describe it to your clients, the importance of not diluting your emergency fund and only using it for real emergencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the emergency fund, sort of, it's in the name, it's for true emergencies, and you're setting it aside as an account that you can dip into when you absolutely need it. And so that's kind of key, right? You don't want to dip into it to maybe buy that outfit for next week, or
Go on
to buy
vacation.
present, or yeah, vacations. Like, having those separate sinking funds is so helpful for that, because you know that that bucket's for vacation, I dip into that bucket for vacation only. And then having your emergency fund separate can be really helpful in times, for example, these days we've been seeing layoffs, we've been seeing people who are maybe like a slower job market. So for those times where maybe you're not able to make an income, or and things like layoffs can happen without notice, that's kind of most likely the case, and so you're rarely ever prepared for it. And so by having a few months of expenses worth set aside in an emergency fund, you can have that confidence to that if something were to happen to my job, I'm covered for a few months. If I wanted to take a break from my job, that's also sometimes good for it to have your emergency savings to for that coverage, if it's a health reason, mental health, family related, whatever it might be. And then a third thing about the emergency fund I find is that it gives people more confidence to then take on adequate risk with their investments. So, if you might feel weary about investing because it feels really risky, but if you have an emergency fund established already, then you can kind of feel like, if my investments were to go down and something were to happen, I don't have to dip into those for the emergency. I have a savings account set aside. So it really does help give you kind of confidence and reassurance that you're set and ready no matter what happens.
I love how your answer really highlighted one thing about money, is that oftentimes it gives us peace of mind. Like when you were talking about layoffs, I think having that emergency fund or savings accounts for different needs really gives you a peace of mind that you can have options and time to look for better opportunities in case you were laid off, and not having to say yes to the first job that comes your way and settle for
Mhm.
that. So thank you for highlighting it from that perspective. And now that we started talking about investing, I feel like obviously once you're over the emergency, debt payoff, and savings bridge, it's time for investing. So,
Mhm.
for a woman in her mid 20s, maybe early 30s, who hasn't gone far with investing, or who has not invested before, what should her priorities be?
Yeah, honestly, like, investing can seem very intimidating because there's a lot of uncertainty. We see the news, or we see the stock markets. There's the charts going up and down. It feels very uncertain, very risky. But I always remind people to focus on the aspects that they can control. So, for example, you can get someone else to manage your investments for you. And that can take out a lot of the guesswork on your end. But one aspect that you can control is how much you're paying in fees. you could be getting a lot of value from having someone manage your investments, but if they're charging you a very high fee, that would eat into kind of the return that you're getting and the money that you get to keep from those investments. So my advice generally is to try and keep your fees below 1% of your account value. So that money is going into your pocket and not an investment manager's pocket. But, regardless of whether you're investing on your own or you're paying someone to do it for you, one really key aspect of investing is to diversify your investments. Essentially making sure that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. Um, you want to try and invest in many different companies across different industries, and also different countries. You're not just focused on maybe US or Canada, but you've got some international companies in there as well, basically ensuring that you're not banking, let's say, your whole retirement on Apple doing really well in 40 years, 30, 40 years, just as an example. But, you've kind of spread out your investments across the global economy, because we know that when even though we might have moments where there are recessions, markets aren't doing well in general, certain companies go out of business, we know that as a collective we're going to keep innovating and inventing. Like we kind of saw when the pandemic started, definitely we saw areas like airlines, cruises didn't do very well, but then companies like Zoom came out, like companies that did well in this new sort of environment we were dealing with. And so we know that if we spread out our investments, there will be some companies that do well, some companies don't do so well, but hopefully they kind of balance each other out. And that really does kind of support your investments. And it does also take the guesswork out. You don't have to find the best company that's going to do amazing this year. You're really kind of spreading out your money and just taking the bet that as a global economy that we're going to grow over the long term. So yeah, spreading out your investments across different types of companies in different places, but also different asset classes. So you might hear like stocks, bonds, and more. That can also help to be in different types of assets that basically perform differently in certain economic conditions. The final priority, though, and almost one of the most important, is to take advantage of like automated recurring deposits. So this seems a little bit not related to investing specifically, but honestly, kind of more than picking the right portfolio, what ends up kind of determining your success as an investor more so is saving consistently. So if you can pay yourself first and set aside a portion of your income to invest automatically, you also end up kind of buying into the stock market at various prices, which does lead to kind of better outcomes in the long term.
I love this. Again, value packed answer. You covered so many important points from, we're just starting. First, you need to make the decision. Are you going to invest yourself, or are you going to work with a robo advisor platform, or are you going to hire a professional, a
Mhm.
human professional to help you do that? Then you need to remember that you need to diversify. So thank you so much for walking us through. And I totally agree. Dollar cost averaging is such an
Mhm.
important thing where you just need to consistently put money in your investment account and buy products, because that actually is a proven strategy to make sure that you get that average price, which I think a lot of people worry, obviously, that, oh my God, I actually might want to wait 6 months because price might fall. That
Mhm.
rarely happens, in terms of no one can predict what's going to happen next
That's
month or in
exactly
3 months. So as Scheherazade mentioned, that dollar cost averaging really helps you make sure that you're entering the market at the average price at all times.
right. Mhm.
So I think that covers pretty much a lot about investing. Why? thing I feel like we didn't cover is the actual accounts. I think a lot of beginner investors don't quite understand that besides just opening a brokerage account, which is whether you're going to go with a robo advisor or with a human advisor, you need to have accounts within that brokerage. And you can
Mhm.
have just a regular cash account, which is similar to your checking account in which you invest. But here in Canada, we have tax advantageous, if I'm saying it right, accounts such as registered retirement savings plan and tax free savings account that allow people to earn some benefits along the way. Scheherazade, can you tell us for women again in that age group that we're focusing on, should
Mhm.
they first prioritize RSP or TFSA? What's your experience with your clients and what's normally your approach?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like, firstly, some people don't realize that these accounts can be used for investing because of the names, like tax-free savings account, registered retirement savings plan. It sounds like you can just put money aside to save, but they're actually so great for investing because anything you earn in those accounts won't be taxed, just like you mentioned, like they're tax advantaged accounts. And so, yeah, honestly, which one you decide to use really depends on your situation. It depends on your goals. Your the RSP, or the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, is primarily for retirement, but you can also use it kind of in the shorter term to withdraw from completely tax free if you are to buy a house or even to go back to school. So if you've got one of those three goals, an RSP might be good for you. The TFSA is a lot more flexible. They both have sort of a cap on how much you can put into them. But the TFSA, when you take the money out, it's also tax free. So you can really put money in and take money out a lot more frequently than you would with an RRSP. So it is great for all the three goals that we just mentioned. The RSP is great for, and a lot more. So, if you know you need this money for a renovation, you probably don't want to put that into an RRSP. The TFSA is the one for you. But let's say you're focused on one of those three goals that we mentioned, the retirement or buying home or going back to school, and you're choosing between the two. A really helpful rule of thumb is looking at your income. So the difference between an RSP and a TFSA basically is how the money going in is taxed, like how the money coming out is taxed. And what I mean by that is when you put money into an RRSP, it reduces your taxable income. So you're saving on tax now, but when you take that money out, that's when you're being taxed on it. That's when it's taxed as income. And so you want to make sure that when you're putting money into an RRSP, your income is higher now than when you expect to take the money out. So a good rule of thumb is that if your income is over around $55,000, then using an RRSP will likely work out better for you than a TFSA because you're not in the lowest tax bracket anymore. But if your income is lower than $50,000, then, you know, you might end up in a situation where if you use the RRSP, when you take the money out, maybe you're in a higher tax bracket, which then makes it not makes it kind of useless using the RRSP. So if your income's under 50,000 and you've got one of those three goals of retirement, buying a home, or going back to school, then you might want to use the TFSA instead of the RRSP for now. It can be a bit more nuanced than that, but I hope just as a starting point that that's helpful for your audience.
That's very helpful. And I actually have not heard of that rule of thumb that you just mentioned about the kind of $55,000 income bracket.
Mhm.
So that's very helpful. I learned something new. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm so glad.
Now that we have covered, I think, the financial foundation, The
Mm.
second part that we were going to talk about is the financial plan, aka your money roadmap. What is a financial plan? And as someone who does not have or does not yet have significant wealth, do I even need it?
Yeah. So, I mean, a financial plan is that roadmap. Like I mentioned a bit earlier, you're considering where you are today, where you need to be to achieve whatever goals you've set for yourself. And the financial plan is what guides you on how to get from that point A to point B by considering your saving and investment strategy, how you're managing your debt, tax planning, and sometimes also like insurance and estate planning too. So that can make it sound kind of complex, but a financial plan can also be very simple. It can become very complex depending on your situation, but no matter how wealthy you are, I think anyone can benefit from having one. Just a kind of a plan and a roadmap on what you're doing with your finances and if it's getting you where you want to be. I think even if you're just starting out, don't consider yourself wealthy. It's a great way to get there eventually.
I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of people can relate to, for example, professional growth. We kind of decide for ourselves where we see ourselves in 5, 10 years. Okay, I want to be working for this company and I want to be at this level of a position. And
Mhm.
you kind of build up your career path, then knowing that in order to get there, you need to work here and here, you need to get this designations and this experience. And it's kind of same with money. Unless you know where
Mhm.
you want to be in 5 to 10 years, you will not be able to have those correct steps in place and follow them. So I
That's
always think
right.
about it in terms of that.
I was just going to say that for a lot of people, I know it's very intimidating sometimes that, maybe I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 to 10 years. I don't know what my income will be. I don't know like how my situation will be different. And so I really encourage people like my clients as well that, start where you are, start with what you know. And you can always make adjustments as you go. When things change, you can come back to your financial plan, but start with kind of what you know and where you are and just build from there.
Totally, I agree with you. And I think the big thing about financial plans is that you can update them. It's not a set in stone document.
Mm.
It's your own, and you can go back to it at any time and adjust it accordingly. So let's say I want to create a financial plan. Where do I start?
Yeah. So the first thing is to kind of identify those goals, like what do you want to accomplish? Because you're going to be kind of working back from there. So, for example, it might be I want to buy a house. So I would start by kind of looking at the areas I'd hope to live in, what those cost today. And I would use that as my starting point. Again, starting with the information that I have, not, trying to predict where the real estate market's going to be in 5 years, but rather just starting with the information that I know and using that as my starting point. So let's say I want to aim for a 20% down payment. I've now got a really good idea of like what my goal is. So the next step would just be to assess where I am right now. So I would look at my income, how much money's coming in, how much money's going out, what are my expenses, how much am I saving? Can I save more? Where am I saving? Again, like, am I using the right accounts? But maybe in this scenario, based on how much I can reasonably save between me and my partner, we're on track to purchasing this home within about 3 years. So I've kind of done the math to say, all right, so the two of us can save X amount. Our down payment's going to be this much. This will take us about 3 years to save up for. Now I can decide if what my money is invested in right now is too risky. If I'm, in all stocks right now, that can be very uncertain in a timeline like 3 years where those might end up. So maybe that's the time to consider taking a safer approach with those savings that we've got earmarked for our home purchase. So kind of taking those steps, I'd say, is a very simple start to a financial plan. And if you got multiple goals, then you would sort of do the same thing for each of your goals, balancing things out based on, again, what you value. Maybe if in my example, my goal is to save for a home, but also retirement, thinking about what is more important, what's more kind of valuable to me. For this situation, I'm 30 years from retirement, but I want to buy a home in 3 years. So that would take on kind of more importance in my plan. And I can sort of, in my plan, look at, if I don't save anything towards retirement, I'm only saving towards my house. Then after 3 years, I start for a saving for my retirement. I can be okay. I think that is a really good and simple start to a plan that can give you a lot of confidence about, your goals, your approach to saving for them, and how your other goals will also fare based on, how you're setting up your plan.
Thank you. I find that talking about retirement, I find that a lot of people under 30, I would say, they're like, well, why should I save for retirement right now if I want to use that money to live a good life now? Or, it's so far, it's like 30, 35, 40 years ahead. I don't even know if I want to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Should they like, what's the approach there? It's very hard for me sometimes to find an answer to that question when someone asks me that, because I understand on paper the longer the time that you have to save and invest, the easier it'll be down the road. But also it kind of makes sense. Yes, I mean, it's so far, and maybe now you want to buy a home or go back and get an MBA. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, honestly, I do love that question because first of all, I think that when you're really young, it is hard to be like, okay, I just started working. I'm like 23 years old, and you're asking me to save for 65-year-old me. And I think there's a bit of a way to kind of reframe that almost, because you're so right. One of the most important things to remember is that because of compounding, the earlier you start, the more you'll be able to actually build your wealth over time and the more you'll make. So you want to make sure that you're starting to invest early. But what I also find with a lot of younger people is they may not necessarily have something specific they want to spend on in the short term. And so maybe don't think of it as saving for 65-year-old you, but you're investing to maximize your wealth. And so, you don't have anything that you're particularly looking to spend on right now, but that means that you're investing relatively long term. And so you can call it whatever you prefer to, whether that's retirement, financial freedom, wealth maximization. But what it means is you're kind of just saving for future you long term. And so, what I usually recommend to people is if there's really nothing else that you're saving for right now, default to saving for future you. And then, things might come up. At 23, you might not be thinking about buying a house, but at 28, you might be. And so, when those different goals come up, that's when you might want to pivot. Let's say if you're putting 100% of your savings towards that long term future you goal, but now, you and your partner decide you want to buy a house, that's when you'd want to pivot and maybe set up a separate sinking fund, a separate account for that new goal, and start putting now maybe 100% of your savings there, because you might want to pick up on the retirement goal afterwards, or even splitting it up so you still got a little bit going into your retirement or your kind of long-term future you goal, and you're kind of primarily focusing on what's important to you short term. So that's another part of like the financial planning process that's so helpful is, you know, you can change your goals and you can different things will come up in different parts of your life that'll be more important than retirement, and you can pivot in the moment just like you said earlier. You can update it, you can see where you're at, and that'll also help you in those decisions on, you know, am I saving for the right thing or not.
Yes, great explanation. Thank you for doing that, Shirizad. One final thing I want to ask you about financial plan is I think a lot of people oftentimes they kind of freeze when they have to think about what their financial goal is because
Mm.
a lot of us are foreign to that concept. We don't talk or think about money in terms of, how do I really make it work for myself? Often, especially, if you're just starting to work on that part of your life. So, could you list for our listeners maybe a couple of financial goals that you oftentimes see to give us a little bit of inspiration?
Yeah. So, you know, the common ones that I think we've brought up a couple times on this call, like retirement, buying a home, those are the two most popular. But otherwise, I'll see people who just put in like general savings, like generally investing. And I think that kind of aligns with those people who are like, I want to start investing. There's nothing in particular. And that's kind of saving for future you. But a lot of other goals that I see, or like that my clients are saving for, sometimes things like weddings, or you know, if you have kids, it's your children's education, or you might just see financial freedom. You know, that again, that long term ambiguous, but it's just saving for yourself in your future.
Whatever speaks to your heart, I think, whatever you want to do. Maybe it's buying a car, any kind of major purchases that you see for yourself in the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years, they
Mm.
can be an inspiration to a financial goal. Well, I think we kind of covered everything about financial plan. Do you think we are missing anything? Is there anything else you'd like to add with regards to creating a financial plan?
Yeah, I think we definitely covered most of it. I think we touched on as well like how when you should think about updating your plan, because like you mentioned, it's not static at all. But if you have big material changes in your life, like your income has changed, your goals have changed, you got married, you're now, you know, combining your finances with someone else, those big changes would prompt an update to your plan. But yeah, you don't necessarily need to update it very, very frequently either. It's really just a tool to make sure that you're on track and that you're feeling confident and, you know, not so stressed about your finances.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Shirizad, are there any final tips you want to share with our audience? Maybe any resources you want to share with us?
I think some resources, especially on the question that you asked about kind of the types of accounts to open, there is this really helpful resource that Wealthsimple has. If honestly, if you Google like I think it's like FHSA versus TFSA versus RRSP. Wealthsimple, Google that. One of the first things that'll come up is this flow chart that you can go step by step and just figure out exactly what account to start with. And I know we discussed it a bit and we talked about there being nuances. So for anyone looking to start and wanting to make sure that their first account is what works best for them, I would definitely check that out. But I think, yeah, we covered a lot. So I do hope this is really helpful for your audience.
I am confident it will be. Thank you for sharing that final tip. So, moving into our last part of the conversation, there are two questions I ask every guest, and it's what is financial freedom to you, and what do you think women should do to empower themselves or to achieve financial freedom?
Oh, I love that question. So to me, financial freedom means kind of always having more money than I need. It means kind of being able to live a happy, healthy life without having to worry about overspending or without having to rely on a 9 to 5 job to pay the bills. Um, In terms of what I think every woman could do to achieve financial freedom, I think one of the biggest things is feel confident to take control of your own finances. I find that this is changing, but especially when I started as an advisor, that many women would feel like they needed to defer to a partner, a brother, a father to handle their finances. But I think we're so lucky to live in an age where good, trustworthy information like your podcast is highly accessible. Yeah, I know that sometimes it can be difficult to distinguish the good from the bad, but there are, there's so much good information. There's easy, low cost ways to invest too. And the research also shows that women are proven to be better investors than men. So trust yourselves
Yes.
and just get started.
Scheherazade, how can our community at In Her Wallet get in touch with you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. My name on LinkedIn is Scheherazade Hasan. Feel free to message me there. My email is shussan@wealthsimple.com if you want to get in touch with me there too.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that information. And thank you so much for being with us today. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation. It's been in the works for some time, and I think it turned out so good. I can't wait to share it with our audience.
Thank you so much, Sophia. This was an excellent conversation. Thanks for having me again.
Well, that is it. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. As always, I want you to give yourself credit for showing up for yourself and your future, because every time you do that, you increase what's financially possible for you. I will see you next week.